All right, so we spent a bit of time talking about spaced repetition, which is the idea that you leave time in between study sessions. Let's now talk about interleaving, which involves how you split up your time within one study session itself. And interleaving is the idea that we should mix up our practice as we go along within the same study session. Because the idea is that, again, returning to the thread that's running through this whole course, that whenever stuff becomes too easy, whenever we're not working very hard, whenever our brain is lifting very light weights, then at that point we stop learning as effectively. And so the idea behind interleaving is that we do a little bit of one topic, and then a little bit of another topic, and then a little bit of a third topic, and then back to the first, rather than do 3 hours on one topic, 3 hours on topic 2, and 3 hours on topic 3, or whatever your timing ends up being. And there's a fair bit of evidence that interleaving improves retention when it comes to studying for exams, but also when it comes to learning anything. So again, in the book, Make It Stick, which I don't have a physical copy of because I read it on Kindle, but you should definitely read that. They talk about this famous hockey coach who, he gets his players to do certain exercises, and then just as they're getting the hang of those exercises, he switches them onto something else. And just as they get the hang of that, he switches them onto something else. And the players don't really like this because they have to work a bit harder, and just as they're approaching the mastery and they're like, oh yeah, I can do this, this kind of makes sense, he moves them onto something else. But he gets results, and the teams end up winning loads of stuff, and the players are happy for it in hindsight because they recognize that actually it's only when stuff is difficult, that's when we're actually learning it. So sort of like me, if I'm practicing the guitar, I try and tell myself that, okay, I'm going to do 10 minutes of kind of chord practice, 10 minutes of finger practice, 10 minutes of music theory. It ends up being I don't know, half an hour of chords, just because once I get the hang of it, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And then I feel happy, and then I start playing songs I already know. But that's not the effective way of learning. What I should be doing is I should be interleaving my guitar practice, just like we should all be interleaving our practice of exam-related stuff. There's been loads of evidence about this when it comes to studying, specifically when it comes to studying maths problems. That's what it seems a lot of the studies are based around. And there was one I've got here from 2010, where they said, and I quote, the interleaving of practice impaired practice session performance, i.e. it made the actual study session more difficult, yet it doubled scores on a test given 1 day later, i.e. it improved exam performance in the long term. Well, long term 1 day later, but there's been loads of studies that corroborate this evidence. Basically, it feels really hard to switch up the topics during the study session, but whenever it feels hard, it's a sign that we're doing it right. When it feels easy, it's a sign that we're doing it wrong. So that's sort of the idea behind interleaving. And yeah, in this study, they got students to practice 4 kinds of maths problems in an order that was either interleaved or blocked, kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, or bit of 1, bit of 2, bit of 3, bit of 4, and kind of repeat. And they found that the interleaving of practice impaired their performance on the day, but actually it improved their performance on the test given a day later. And the theory behind this, as they say in the study, is that when we are blocking stuff, for example, if we're doing maths problems and we're doing lots of the same problem at once, just changing the numbers, our brain starts to take shortcuts. It starts to realize, oh, okay, that's a method, and then it just starts applying that method. But if we're doing different sorts of problems that are all mixed up, our brain has to take that initial step of thinking, okay, what method do I have to use to solve this problem? And the very fact that our brain requires that extra step means that we're more likely to perform better on the exam when the exam is given later on. And so how does that work for me? So when I'm studying medical stuff, what I do is I keep interleaving in mind. So for example, if I'm studying physiology for the day and I'm spending a whole day doing physiology, it's probably a bit suboptimal because I should probably split my time up between physiology, anatomy, and biochemistry. But at the moment, it's physiology that I'm focusing on. If I'm going to do physiology for a whole day, what I try and do is I try and be like, okay, in the morning I'm going to start off with nerves, and then in the afternoon I'll do a bit of muscles, and then I'll revise nerves a little bit with my active recall questions, and then I'll go into some kidney stuff, and then just as I've kind of gone about maybe half an hour to an hour on the kidney stuff, then I'll move on to the respiratory stuff, and I try and interleave my practice of the stuff within that study session. And equally, when I was preparing for my, for example, 3rd year or 2nd year medical school exams at Cambridge, we had loads of subjects that we had to prepare for. And my technique was to memorize lots of different essay plans for the different subjects. So in the exam, we had to pick from 5 essays and we had to answer 2. And I was hoping that if I prepared enough essays in advance, I'd be able to, I'd have 2 come up in the exam that I knew how to do. But that meant that I was memorizing essays across all these different disciplines. And so what I was doing, kind of keeping interleaving into account, because that was around the time that I discovered this technique, I would kind of start off by memorizing a few essays for paper A, and then go on to paper B, and then paper C, and then paper 1, and then for some reason it was 1 A, B, C, D, I don't know why. But I would try and incorporate interleaving into this because I knew that if I just repeated my spider diagrams of my, comparative cognition essays, I knew that if I just did all of those in one session, then that would probably be suboptimal. So that's how I personally use interleaving. I think it's just something worth keeping in the back of our minds, that we want studying to be hard. And, like the analogy of going to the gym, you don't want it to be easy. If it's easy, then yeah, sure, you might be having fun, but you're not actually boosting your muscles. Just like if studying is easy, it might be a bit more fun, but we're not actually improving our brain performance. So yeah, that's interleaving, and let's move on to the next video.